Hi everyone, and most welcome to today's webinar. It's going to be about future-proofing sustainability, and my name is Lovisa Lönegren and I'm the Secretary General at NMC. Today's methods for reliable and predictable measurements of sustainability may be categorized as too little, too late, and scattered around ESG tools, siloed SDG targets, and also a cocktail of circularity measures that do not add up. So what if there is a solution for predictive outcomes based on accurate, real-time, dynamic, scientific, big data-driven assessments, a future global standard and go-to place for business, cities, and investors? Today, we're going to hear about the scientific and unbiased measurement system of Innorbis and how they address the sustainability transition for companies and cities. How to spot the long-term market loser and winner. And we're also going to hear about how circular economy plays a vital role in this equation. We hope that you will get inspired and are able to bring some ideas with you back home to your organizations. And before we begin, I'd just like to mention a few things. We will carry on this webinar until 4 o'clock. The recording of this webinar will be available on our website under NMC Archiv. Please use headphones for better sound and also turn off your microphones if you haven't done so already. And if you have any questions, you're most welcome to ask them by typing them in the chat forum, in the chat box. And it will also be possible to ask questions later on through the chat. And at NMC, we want to pinpoint which SDG targets that each of our webinars and seminars contributes to. And this webinar in particular contributes to all the SDGs. It's an overall webinar in that sense. So today's agenda looks a little bit like this. I will first tell you about some upcoming events that we have at NMC. Then we will carry on with the webinar and listen to the presentations from our keynote speakers. I will shortly introduce them to you. And at the final half hour, we will have a panel discussion. And this is also where you have the possibility to ask many questions if you have them. And we'll, as I mentioned, wrap up and finish by 4 o'clock. So today, I just want to mention a few upcoming events that we have. This calendar is in Swedish, but I hope that's fine. Next week, first off, we have a digital network meeting. Since Almedalen sadly is cancelled this year, we decided to try to have an online mingle event. So please join us next week for that. And then in September, we will have a webinar with 3 sustainable leaders, and I will shortly tell you who they are. Later on in September, we will also have a webinar about the EU taxonomy and how that relates to companies and how it affects companies and green investments and so on. This is a follow-up from our webinar we had a few weeks ago about the ESG. And then in October, we have a study visit in Skåne to a circular food producer. It's Food Hills. So those of you who are in Skåne, you are most welcome to join that study visit. And then our biggest event of the year, as you probably know by now, is our Sustainability Day that we will host here at Bryggasalen, where we are right now, actually. It's on the 15th of October, so please note that date in your calendars already now. It will be a full-day conference followed by our gala dinner and award ceremony for the Sustainable Leadership Award. And then in November, we are partnering with Aktuell Hållbarhet and their conference, Hållbart Näringsliv. And there are more things coming up as well. So keep track in our newsletter and on LinkedIn. And I just want to tell you a little bit more about our Sustainability Day. Last year's event was a great success. So I hope many of you will be able to join us also this year here in Stockholm. We are currently planning to have this as a physical event, but we are, of course, following the authorities' recommendations. And if it turns out that we cannot host it as a physical event, we will make it a digital event. So you are still welcome to sign up already now. And on the picture here, you see some of the speakers that are already confirmed. And I want to just to mention a few of them. For instance, we have Per Alberger, who is the government CSR ambassador. And we also have Gabriel Wikström, who is the national coordinator of Agenda 2030, and he's also a former minister. And then lots of other interesting people. And the theme of this day will be sustainability drives business and business drives sustainability. So you don't want to miss this day. So make a note already now in your calendars and sign up. And as I was mentioning, later on that same day, we have the gala dinner and the award ceremony for our Sustainable Leadership Award. And here on the picture, you see the 3 finalists that we published today. So it's official as of this morning. So we have Håkan Lundstedt, the CEO of Synsam Group. Then we have Johanna Persson, the CEO of Berensen. And last but not least, we have Joachim Levin, who is the CEO of Nudie Jeans. So these 3 excellent business leaders will be at the award ceremony, and so you can meet them then. But you have also the possibility to meet them in a webinar in September, where they will elaborate on the leadership experiences and share their best views on sustainability and inspire you to how they think about business and sustainability. So don't miss that. So with that said, let's begin with today's webinar. And today's speakers are Ingela Wickman-Bois and Angelica Lips da Cruz. Ingela, she has a long life experience in different roles in big corporations. And today she is a senior advisor involved in strategic circular business missions. And she is also associated to Exeter University Business School Circular Economy Center. And then Angelica, she is the CEO and founder of Innorbis and a key driver towards sustainable finance and business. She's a well-booked keynote speaker, and for instance, she participated in the United Nations General Assembly Sustainable Development Impact Summit, where she was the co-author of an UN paper about the SDGs and how to shape an agenda for action and serve as a platform to harness cutting-edge scientific, technological, and digital innovations. She's also an executive leader and entrepreneur working in the interlink between economics and sustainable development solutions, together with worldwide experts and high-tech development. And her background is in international investment, large corporations, and business establishments. She's a former vice president of Citibank, RCI Bank, and SEB responsible for global portfolios. Long introduction there. With that said, I'd like to warm up with and engage you who are participating today by asking you to fill out this Menti form. So please go open your phones and go to menti.com and enter the code 235716. And we will like you to answer this question. What are the most important aspects for future-proofing sustainability in businesses? So we'd just like to hear what you think. So go to menti.com and enter the code 235716. We'll see what you come up with. It's quite a big question to answer, but I hope, here we go, some answers are coming in. Shared value and circular economy. Important aspects for future-proofing sustainability in business. Executive compensation. Here we go. Common framework. transparency, circular economies, gaining, outside the box, renewable energy, reliability in data, system approach. Oh, very interesting. Purpose-driven, leadership. Shared value is gaining now. Leadership and shared value in circular economy and transparency are gaining. Very interesting. I'll leave these words to pop up while we go to our first speaker of today. Enough said from me for now. I would like to give the floor to Ingela. Welcome, Ingela.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
You have the clicker there.
Okay, today we're going to talk about, of course, this sustainability tool, including the circular economy metrics that we'll come to later. But I will start off with informing you a little bit what is going on the circular economy stage, so to speak, in different aspects, and how this come into this with circular economy metrics, why this is important for the implementation of circular economy business models, and also on governmental, on a national level for the roadmaps for countries. So, but I will start a little bit with a reflection back to last year, a seminar, How to Finance a Circular Economy, a year ago in Stockholm, together with mainly Dutch financial banking frontrunners as Rabobank, DLL, European Investment Bank, and others. And it was around circular economy and the difficulties in getting investors and banks and so on to finance and to credit these business models due to the fact that they were unproven, and they're still early days for the circular economy and for business, and we are so into the linear system that it's really hard to break through and break out of this. But the concept of the circular economy is well established by now, but the question of how organizations who wish to move to a circular model can be financed is a vexing one. There has been a disconnect between finance and CE. With CE, when I say CE, I will do that a lot of times, it's circular economy, short for that. So with the lack of traditional financial options being available for the circular business models, as from banks and institutional investors. So finance is a key enabler of the circular economy, that's for sure. And without financing, organizations will not be able to function and circular economy will not be able to develop. However, this trend is very slowly starting to move. For example, the launch of the world's second circular economy fund, BlackRock, in 2019. And also the EU Commission committing to support firms as they transition to a circular economy model. Just a couple of days ago, it was also launched a new update of the circular economy package, or the EU Commission has taken some stands on how to support more in detail than before the transition to circular economy in many ways, and most and foremost business. So, where does these metrics come in? So metrics for measuring circularity are also beginning to be developed, which I will come to later in the presentation. So there are also some other, like circularity score based on Thomas Reuter's method for measuring ESG points, uses risk adjusted performance measures such as shape ratio and trainer ratio to assess risk return combination. So the next step is to analyze further the role of finance within the development of circular economy and what drives the investors' willingness to invest in circular economy, and the possible link between finance and barriers to the development of circular economy business models, which we actually they are proven to be a fact today. So this involves evaluating further the performance of firms committing to circular economy and if circularity can be a hedging tool against environmental risks and risks of stranded assets, and how circular business models can actually improve long-term revenues and resilience to commodity price shocks. So this is deeply rooted in the fact that the world's population and its demand for raw material is growing. So we are beginning to see, to confront the reality of our resource limits. It's more and more understood in all the sectors and all business and the governments globally. So how circular is the world today? With only 9% circular. So actually forward-thinking business are keen to capitalize on the opportunities, and the opportunities lie around estimated US dollars 4.5 trillion. So there is a huge opportunity here. So summing up this long introduction, so in recent years, you can say that the circular economy has really increasingly appeared as a new model to pursue sustainable economic growth. So, however, for companies and governments to be able to assess their circular performance, they need consistent measurement processes and metrics. And at the same time, what we fight right now is there is no consensus approach for how companies can measure their effectiveness in moving towards more circular business models, which makes it a process that is difficult to plan, to monitor, and to manage, actually. So that's a little bit what I'm going to talk about today, about these barriers and what we can do about them. So now I will change the slide. What should we measure? What indicators are appropriate and what scale? And how retain system perspective, which is very important, that we don't sit in our, which is the case right now, actually in silos, discussing different materials, and we stay there by coming up with some policy or some legislation, not thinking about the unintended consequences or the system effects of that decision. Measuring circularity, what actually do you look at? Well, there are three common class of indicators found in debates around circular economy, and they are product or facility specific input/output indicators, measuring some measure of efficiency, for example, amount of energy or water used per ton or per product. Recycling rate as percentage of all waste generated, or percentage of recycled content in a product, or the value of that content. It's a circus of different way to measure this. Another one is longevity, durability and product life extension to measure product material and component lifespans, or whole life material utilization rates. And life cycle indicators to highlight the environmental impact of a product across its full life cycle, cradle to grave, including impacts of human health and ecotoxicity. So these three are the most common and which are discussed, but they're also combined, of course, with the classic ones like the LCAs, the material cost accounting in operation management, and greenhouse gases and biodiversity. So these sort of lies on top or on the ground, in the base, if you like. So each of these indicators have merit anyway and can be found widely already in the reporting protocols of many companies. So the choice of indicators and the way they are applied varies from company to company. So some companies are also beginning to develop new approaches and indicators to drive innovation and organizational transformation around circular value propositions. And this, of course, is also a, which sort of messes it up a little bit, because all of the companies, they have their own indicators, which makes it very hard to come forward with some kind of common view and a common standard and a framework. I should mention that there is a British standard circular economy ISO standard which has been launched, but that is as the other ISO standards, and it has its merits and its drawbacks. So talking about these different kind of measures and methods for measurement and the actual metrics that comes out of them, to widen the perspective a little bit, we can say that the levels are for measuring are macro, meso, micro, and nano level, what we usually talk about. And of course, the macro level, that is on national level, and meso is on industry level, and micro is more like company level and networks of companies and consumers, and nano level is the smallest part is product and component level. And at all these levels, you need to look at have a different scope of the measures and the methods that you use. So this is one thing that is actually complicated the work for a common framework, and have consensus on it all is well understandable. And then you, of course, except for the levels on the macro level down to the nano level, you can also divide it into sectors. So you have different sector priorities. So you have to, if you work in agriculture, for example, or if you work in manufacturing or in financial services, everybody has to ask themselves, what is the unlocking key circular move for us? And that can, of course, differ very, very much. So, for example, these are some examples. It's not exhaustive in any way. We look at agriculture, maybe you look at soil fertility, for example, and of course, non-toxicity to phase out toxic materials from foods for the food systems. When it comes to construction, it's to reduce the virgin materials used and to reuse them. When you tear down buildings, etc., you can reuse things, and you can innovate around that, and that is ongoing. A lot of innovation going on in all these sectors, which is very gives hope. So manufacturing, of course, the closing the loop and ensure that. Waste management is to minimize the downcycling of material, and financial services, circularity portfolio. And on it goes. With health, of course, is also toxics and also hazardous waste, but also actually to look outside of your business, not only what you're actually doing, but talking about unintended consequences, system thinking. For example, the health business, taken as an example. I know we will bring up that later, but maybe you could think of, if you're working in the health business, to look at, to work with water treatment facilities, to innovate around how you actually take care, what is coming out in type of medicals in the water, going out into the seas and polluting the seas and the fish that we eat later, etc. So there is thinking, using an old expression, thinking out of the box is really what we need to do. That is system thinking. So the last one was transport and logistics. You can read yourself, fleet use, of course, and lifetime. And here we have, of course, the electrification and battery, and a lot of technical innovations that can help us move forward. Another way to look at it is to find the metrics and the indicators and possible indicate KPIs. Is to look at the life cycle or the circular value chain. I won't go through this, but it's just to see how you can, in the life cycle and in the operation management and along the road, you can pick up different KPIs in all of the parts of this chart. So you can say also about this that the graphic highlights how circular methods can vary along the value chain. So you can say that about half, there was a research about this, how much percentage-wise is internal and external. And about half of the metrics today relate to internal processes or of a business, e.g. energy efficiency and things like that. So we need to ramp up and to have a bigger creativity to move from the ordinary sustainability measures to more circular creation and circular value creation. So another one which also affects the metrics and the KPIs that you're using is where you are in terms of maturity. And the table here shows examples of how circular related metrics can change over time as a company moves from operational efficiency aspirations to value creation ones. And it's in the categories of environmental, social, and economic. And you can see how it moves on the left-hand side, operational efficiency. You can see how these measures we find often today in the sustainability reporting, and how they actually move and be more circular value creation related on the right side. I can't stop there. I must stop there. You can look at the slides afterwards if you want to go into that. I need to go on because I only have 25 minutes, so we go on. So what is the business value in measuring? Well, actually, I would like to add a first point here actually is, which is not on the chart, is actually to get finance. And that is also not only external financial resources, but also internal actually. So you can with the CEO and the executive as a sustainability manager, you can debate on the value of, for example, implementing or introducing a circular business model is much easier if you have this way and methods and clear metrics to point at when you argue for your project, for example. So otherwise, you can look at values like strategic competitive advantage, of course. You can compare yourself with the other industries and with other companies if you have metrics and if you have a common framework around it. So your competitors are measuring the same thing. That goes without saying. And integration of circularity across business is much easier to integrate it into processes and into different levels of the company if you have metrics and KPIs. Mitigate risk, of course, versus linear business models. You can clearly show through a calculation what is not only the revenue and increased revenue, but also the risk. And here you can, of course, use the classic methods I mentioned earlier about measuring risk and compare to ESG factors, etc., that already exist today. So I urge you to use many measurements to be on the safe side. So external communication, corporate core values, and branding, of course. You can boost internal management competence and culture. Of course, the internal culture is very important because it has to do with the brand image as well, and branding, employer branding, etc. So that is it has a role in that too inside of the company. And I mentioned already the industry compatibility ratings. Compare yourself to others. So here we stand today, but I must say that there has lately, this year has been it's very hopeful because there's a lot of incentives taken for new frameworks, for new alignments, for business, by business. Which also will be aggregated. At the end of the day, aggregated business data can be to be aggregated to serve public purposes as well, and governments and national ambitions in the circular economy field. So alignment is underway, and I'm going to present to you one of the newest, actually presented in the World Economic Forum in February this year. It's Ellen MacArthur Foundation who launched it. It's called Circularity, and it supports the company's transition towards a circular economy, regardless of what industry or complexity and size and what, you know, sector you're in. It's going beyond assessing products and material flows, which we are looking into very much today. So going beyond that, this company level measuring tools reveals the extent to which a company has achieved circularity across its entire operation. And it does this by using the widest set of indicators currently available. Enablers and outcomes of this are, for example, the measures company entire circularity, support strategy for circular business models. Of course, you can use this as a in your scenario analysis and when you work out the strategy for the company. So this is one tool amongst other strategic management tools to use, but certainly is a good one to have as a start. So what it also does, it identifies weak spots and possibility for improvements and risks, if there are any, and you can bring out a plan to mitigate those risks. Transparency to external stakeholders, and it's peak opportunities for additional brand value, of course, this is. So how this was done, it has been developed by the foundation, Ellen MacArthur Foundation, as I mentioned, in collaboration with 13 global partners and the Circular Economy 100 member companies. And in alignment with other circular economy related initiatives going on, which is the best part of this, that actually aligning this cacophony of measurements being out there right now. As somebody said, that I know well in the circular economy sphere, it's like a circus. So this is the first attempt to bring them all together and try actually seriously to bring a framework together. They are also, they are looking at, as a part of the project, methodology was tested by a group of leading European businesses with real product data to ensure its robustness and relevance economy-wide. And in addition, several other stakeholders from investors, regulators, consultancies, and universities were involved in the project. So today, 500 global businesses actually have signed up to Circularity. And this is very promising. We'll see what will come out of it. But the thing is that they also tie to them other tools. Some of them we know today, like the GRI, for example. Most of you are related to that in some way if you are a sustainability manager. It's there are three ones that they actually work with today. It's the material circularity indicator, MCI, and that is an assessment tool for companies to improve product design and material procurement. So the MCI tool measures the circularity of material flows for selected products. It allows companies to build from product to portfolios and can be extended to a company level view on the circularity of material flows. So support decision-making on product design and material procurement, to take it shortly. And how the MCI and Circularity complement one another is that on the company level, Circularity and the product level material circularity indicator are complementary as they address different needs, but with the same data set. And this is very practical. So the MCA data, when available on a company or on a business unit level, can be applied to the Circularity material flow related question indicators. The other tool is the Circular Transition Indicator, CTI, and you can find, also mention that you can find all this information and also sign up for the tools on the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website and also World Business Council Sustainability Development web page. So you will find a lot of more details there. But I can tell you about the CTI, what it is. It is a self-assessment framework for companies to help them understand the circularity performance of their material flows, a little bit as the MCI, but also the energy consumption related to that. So it also look at the use of critical materials and circular material productivity. So it allows companies to decide the assessment scope and the appropriate time frame and view an online dashboard to update data and see results in real time. So these elements enable CTI to be used in scenario planning. They are also useful in having informed discussions with suppliers and customers. So other benefits and more details are then found on the webpage of the VBCSD. And how then does the Circularlytics and CTI complement each other? Now, they have found, the Foundation and the VBCSD have worked together to ensure the greatest viable degree of alignment as to how we collectively define and measure circular economy for companies, and importantly, the definitions and the ways each method measures material flows have been aligned so the companies can use the same data set if they choose to use both tools, Circularlytics and the CTI. So I would say that they have come the furthest with the CTI. And then you have the GRI, which is, you all know that, what it is. It provides standards for sustainability reporting on a range of economic, environmental, and social impacts. So, but there is a specific one here they are looking at, and it's the Waste Reporting Standard 306, which includes actually elements of circular economy. And how they work together is that GRI includes elements of circular economy, and companies who use either GRI 306 or Circularlytics are able to use the same data in both methods. As you can hear, they all work together and are trying to actually merge all these things together. So how to use all these tools? I will recommend to use them as a Kickstarter. You can identify circular opportunities and linear risks. Yes, okay. I'm still ready. So set a baseline and monitor progress and start value chain conversations, attract new business and response to investors' needs under development. So that's a start. And then this last picture, connecting to what we are going to talk about, what Angelica is going to talk about, and finance. What is actually lacking in these measures that and the metrics that I've mentioned is the finance and investor perspective and their needs. And they are Elmacott Foundation and they are and the Circularlytics and so on. They will look at these as a next step. So it's under development. So to sum up, there is a need for a common framework, a scientifically based metrics in order to create a level playing field for circular business models versus linear in general, and to do the smartest strategies from a sustainability and profitability point of view. So we can't achieve a circular economy until we can properly measure it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingela. Very interesting. And we will now give the floor to Angelica. So we will have time for any questions that you in the audience might have in the panel discussions later on. So over to you, Angelica.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be talking to the NMC network and everybody out there listening to this. Let's enter the field of how do we do this? How are the scientific measurements operating to drive sustainability and to integrate and to really give out outcomes that it's what we want to do with all the SDG targets and with the importance of the ESG factors into our economy and our mitigation of risk. The current situation is quite tricky today, especially with the crisis going on. I would say for 10 years ago, we have already started from the financial crisis an increased regulation in the market, and that is not stopping there. I mean, it's just the beginning. We have a market development, and the challenges there are very great. The social and climate consequences are even greater. And we see today increased geopolitical risk together with the situation on the health side of a whole population, right? So I would say today, if there is anybody out there saying that there is no impact in measuring financial risk with social aspects, well, the answer is actually given by the nature, right? All the economic ratios, and take the P ratio, for example, it's ridiculous. It's an old legacy that didn't help us since February with the crisis that we're seeing today. So yes, we do have today, I would say, not a subprime crisis. We have a climate and social prime crisis in a very special market, multi-complexity system. We have Innorbis. We've worked with Innorbis since 2017. The first 2 years were tests and a lot of research. This is not an easy question to answer. And today we have above 15 data sources. We have a fantastic analytics and very high technology tool incorporating today 20,000 companies and 193 countries. It means all the countries. We have open source and purchase data. We work today with 300 indicators and still under development. Innorbis is definitely an objective measurement of what we call the environment, social, and governance aspects. Is an independent system, and it's giving transparency into all these aspects that are not just economic and financial. These are some of the data sources that we have tested and that we operate with today. Let me stay here a little bit and talk about how important the data sources are, because you cannot have bias and already analyzed when you do really scientific measurements. The data has to be raw, has to come to the sources who own that data. For example, a corporate CSR report or climate reporting, like carbon emissions, wasting tons and water, and all of those raw data, okay? It's not something that is unreal. It's actually measuring and getting the information from the real world. It's actually not allowed in a scientific measurement that you work with data such as media that is, you know, that could be fake, right? So unless you have this kind of real information, and not just from one stakeholder such as a company, you need all the stakeholders, right? So you need to get what is the individual saying, what is the legislative factor of it, what is the whole execution in the market, what's the value added that a corporation is putting through into a market, not only looking into already given statistics, because the statistics are there just to make a cause, and then ask me, I have a lot of statistics, but so it's the measurements are in a completely different way, and without them you are just for example, working with looking at a cost line such as transportation and trying to think, okay, what am I going to do here to reach the climate goals if I only have carbon emissions, for example? It doesn't make sense. You need a meaningful measurement theory in order to get into the point of what outcome and impact you are doing as a corporate or as a drive towards climate goals or social aspects goals. So to be very clear on the data, today we have even though the criteria is simple in that case, it's a raw data we're talking about, it's indigestible, okay? Because you have tons, you have liters, you have, you know, you have so many different complexity that if you don't put that in a system, it gets lost, the information gets lost. You have no opportunities to manage these outcomes that you're actually you have an intention to do. So Innorbis works with open architectures, with all the stakeholders analysis from the country level, from the community, the cities, the corporation, all of that. That's a framework. And with rigorous science, we can compare with a very high reliability and really transparently talk about what progression steps have these corporate cities or countries made towards the climate goal, for example, or the increase of the well-being of the population in a country or in a city. These are quality assured by an independent authority, and it exists for 100 years ago. It's well established, but it hasn't entered the financial world yet, which is what I'm driving within Innorbis, the integrated framework of the sustainability measurements into the financial and economic assessment. Let's also mention that measurements are not scores, are not rating, and are not norms, okay? Measurements are creating quantitative and qualitative steps in the progression. Ratings are just ordinal, okay, and they don't work with the uncertainties that we have in the market today, and they don't have a quality assurance. Norms, for example, they miss out on the mean because the variation can be huge. So if you work with norms, it doesn't work to really see the outcome of the progression steps. So having said that, let's take a look into very closely what kind of process steps do we need to do here? How do we do this? So if you start with me, bear with me here, in the data collection, that's a big one. I mean, a lot of people and a lot of NGOs have created fantastic data sources around it. And it's very important to indicate that that is a responsibility of everybody that owns a business as well to report on that data. But I would say if you do not have an informed structure around that information, if you do not design the measurement categories to actually create the progression steps, what am I talking about? I'm talking about, okay, how can a child run if it hasn't even crawled and started to walk, right? So you cannot just take the data collection and start assuming things and go out to the impact reporting. That doesn't work. Believe me, because I've tested. It doesn't work, okay? It's not reliable. So you need that categorization. We do create that within our database with natural language processes, because we know that sustainability data is not only quantitative and numeric. There's a lot of text out there. There's a lot of information that needs to be gathered, and that's a very important information. So Innorbis works with measurements that has no loss of information. And the data is evolving. I mean, we will never be happy enough with this data because that's the same thing with the economic data. We need all of it, and we improve it all the time, and that's good. And then you can start the analysis behind what is that we are going to integrate. What are the priorities of a company or of a city to drive certain goals, and that is decision making. That is business intelligence, very well informed, transparent, comparing, so you can make the right investment with perhaps capital that is scarce. And back to the crisis that we are having today, I mean, the capital, there is liquidity in the market, but come on, the capital needs to be prioritized where to be allocated. Budgets, forecasts, funding, and risk mitigation. So without those processes, it gets lost and you don't know what the outcome is or if you are giving any impact at all. How do we work together as a whole society? So Innorbis gathers not only company data, but also the countries and all this information around the different stakeholders. It could be the financial sector, it could be the private sector, the public sector, together with the regulators. So let me mention a couple of them. The TCFD guidelines are very important driving climate goals. We've mentioned already the global reporting, the GRI, and the PRI, the principal responsible investors. These are all important and driving the integration that needs to be happening within the investments and the financial world. So ESMA is, for example, regulating like Finansinspektionen is here in Sweden. So these needs to drive towards fair trade, transparent, and that's what's going to come next with the European new taxonomy and the the implications with reported information from all the players in the sector today, and that impacts a lot the corporations' information and what we have to gather. I would say we need to gather the information, we need to transform it. Again, we need to measure it, and then we will see outcomes so we can report the progression that we want towards the SDGs targets. Let me talk a little bit about objectivity in the measurement. So without a framework like that, you are still on the subjective part. And that is something that the financial market doesn't like. I mean, you can, of course, as an asset manager, think that, oh, I believe this or that. But what Innorbis does is actually take away the problems of the subjectiveness, if you like it or not, if you think it's more good for the environment or not. So it's out of the question here, because we, not only the data and the information and the expertise we have around the system today, and that's very large, and with the experts. Again, I'm not a biologist. I'm not an expert on the environmental causes. So I'm an economist. So I need that information. We need all these very competent people out there gathered in a framework so we can progress. So out with the silos. Integration, yes, if you listen to this and you are an ESG analyst or a sustainability manager out there, step up. What you work with matters, and it's very important that it gets integrated with financial control, the accounting, and the priority and the steering of the business or the public city, for example. It's extremely important. Otherwise, we don't see any effect of all these movement and data collection and drive towards the intention of having a more sustainable development. Trustworthiness, and I would say gathered with different certification, that's very good. But remember, Innorbis framework is not a certification of it's green or black. Some of my colleagues, they do that very well. It's a neutral system. It's an independent and objective framework for measuring what's going on. Are we driving towards that side, or what's the progression here? And we are an evolved society. We have ambitions. We have a legacy of the 21st century that shouldn't be, you know, old, because we have the technology today to do all this. And why wouldn't we use it with machine learning and the collection, the global information that gets so quick? So I'll tell you an interesting thing. Sometimes we see things in the system and I say, oh, okay, so this is coming next. I cannot predict when. And my guess is, of course, it will happen in a year's time. And maximum half of that time, the predictions in the stock market happens. It's quite amazing to see that, how quick we are. And I think that's all about the global awareness increasing and the information development that we have in the world that we didn't have for 20 years ago without the internet and without all these quick, and I love it, the quick real-time dynamics. So for the accountants out there, I would say 1-year-old accountants and statements is not enough. We need, of course, to work with those standards, and we will. However, you know, you are missing out if you don't have the information and the real-time information you need to mitigate your risks or to drive your production and to drive your lean, efficient business, so you can achieve not only profitability, but also the sustainable growth. Let me show you one example, because some people are still asking sometimes, does it matter? Does it work? Is the ESG important? A couple of months ago, I still heard some of the rating companies of our world saying that, oh, ESG and sustainability doesn't really matter for our risk assessment. That means the capital price out there is not based today on any of other aspects than a construct that is our financial mechanisms today. We have proven with our brilliant partners here as well, and I cannot show all the clients and all the data we have, but this one I can. We created an index. It's a direct index. Everybody can work with it. Just to test that the content of an ESG fundamentals within the financial perspective of asset management, for example, of capital allocation, would matter. And the results of it are fantastic. The results of it during the crisis are fantastic. We read a Sharpe ratio of 1.54, and we are ahead of the comparison like the stock 600 and the market indexes 22% above. I know a lot of people out there are very worried that they're not delivering, for example, from their capital management. It could be pension funds, it could be funds and yeah, other financial large institutions. It's important to understand that ESG matters when it's measured in a very fundamental and scientific impact way. And that's the result that I can show today of Innorbis with a classic startup strategy with risk premium. That's just to tell there is no trade-off. Some people still say if we invest, oh, there's a cost in implementing circular economy aspects or sustainability indicators. Well, if you still are on the cost and just reporting, I would say, please start integrating and look beyond the figures because it matters. It's not a trade-off. You need to start getting the opportunities instead of just getting the costs, or even worse, when people say that they are still on the marketing and communication function. I get a little bit worried because they are missing out on a lot of risk and a lot of losses coming out our way in the economic and societal markets at the moment. I give you an example. Today, a lot of large corporations are struggling because the sales figures have dropped. There is a lot of liquidity, a lot of funding going on, but the credit risk of this is huge. So when we talk about risk of default in financial terms, like can the company pay the loans? Today, there is a big question mark, right? Because if they still just track sales figures, they are not tracking functionality, they are not tracking what is the outcome of all of the business. It's like, again, just taking one line of the accounting system and disregarding all the off-balance sheets items that are there and that should be included. Could be social aspects, it could be, again, environmental aspects and governance and steering. But it's very important to understand that if you are just looking to the profitability, you have no visibility, okay? You are actually not aligned with what the real world is going on, what kind of mitigation we need to do here and get help of the sustainable indicators, such as the ones that operate with circular economy. It's just one framework that operates with all of these aspects that are very, very financial material. That's one way. Again, this index is a stock index. It's based on corporations from small to large, and it's European. And we've done a couple of other ones. We are actually a global lead into the ESG indexes, and I'm very, very proud of it. Without the processes, without the measurements, without these sustainability criteria, we wouldn't have been able to really show the materiality of this. Let me show you another graph, which is For example, how do we find within a sector the ones that are sticking out, both opportunities and the ones that might be losing in the competitive advantage out there? And the reliability here is 0.96. We don't work with anything below that. And that is giving a very, very relevance into the economy and the financial markets today. Still working with standard deviation and uncertainty, that is very important. We have the quality assurance of the comparison of all those companies. This is just a scorecard, an example of how we design to our clients and aggregate all of the data information and giving out their positioning compared to their peers. I would say very important, this is another example from the retail sector, is to have the circular supply chain, for example, in this example, in the different stakeholders' perspective, so you have a trust in what you're reading. For example, you cannot just look into KPIs that would measuring a material like cotton without understanding what are the supply chains behind that. How are you treating those, let's take Global Compact, the 10 mandates that needs to be completed. Why would you still operate in those kind of business that we know are giving a lot of losses? Because it's not driven anymore by just pushing out production. You need to include a lean, efficient coverage for the demand in the market. And by doing that, you are going to start focusing on what's important for our society and therefore align your business. This is another example from the same sector of where we do work with the indicators of the circular economy towards the SDG targets. We map and we address what are the SDG targets that they are most focusing on. Now, we all know the SDG targets, 233 official indicators are actually very, very correlated. So when we work with one, we work with many other ones. This is just an example to show the climate action of this water management, for example, the efficiency in the savings of water and other land use and air emissions and these kind of metrics that are multi-stakeholder. Sometimes we talk about what I call the universe of commons. Today, for example, we do operate in the commodities market, oil, but maybe one day in the future we will have water there and we will have air, and somebody needs to start, looking into that and how do we measure that. It's extremely important for driving what we want to drive in this world, right? Transparent and in a progressive way. So in a nutshell, what we do is that we take the company's measurements and we address that in the financial sector, in the economics, that every single money allocated and managed towards the sustainability field actually is helping competitive advantage in the market and contributing to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals specified by all the members of the United Nations. This is a great framework for us to communicate around. Of course, there are a couple of issues with all of these data and these indicators, but we have worked very hard to solve the impact. And we were probably one of the first ones, and I'm not sure we are still the only one to map all of this in an objective and scientific way to get the outcomes and the impact of it into our society. Quantifying ESG and the materiality of all these sustainability aspects are very hard, but I would like to say again that the funding price, the stock price, and the public choice matters, and when it's very transparent, it makes sense. It's a perfect decision-making tool that we can add into the creating the value added, the purpose driven of every single player, corporate, city, country, and all of us around together, I would say. We are in one planet, a global population. And this is a system for shared visions of the sustainable development and the progression. And I would challenge you to say, okay, who is the leader out there listening to us today to join us and step up, and let's start using that as a real tool inside your business. So not only reporting, I would say, not only gathering data. Let's do this into a much higher level in the value chain. I thank you today for being here and towards a better sustainable development.
Thank you very much, Angelica. And please join me and Ingela here in the sofa, and we will have a little panel discussion. We received one question from the audience.
Perfect.
And it's for you, Angelica.
Yes.
So I start with that one. It's just maybe a little bit of clarification. How is the company data collected for Innorbis analysis? So if you could just clarify that a little bit.
Yeah. We do purchase data today, and we do get a lot of open source data. That is, of course, a work in itself. We have very rigorous criteria for what kind of data we get in. It has to go through the aspects of how you create a transparent and objective measurement. So it's not all the data that we can work with. So very good integrity, transparent data from good sources, not analyzed, some of it.
Would you look at sustainability reporting and annual reports and that sort of things as well?
Yes, but not if it's already analyzed and in that case already with a intention. We work only with raw data. It's not a data that is created by a machine. No, that is a reported data from the owners of the data source.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
Very good.
If you have any more questions, please type them in the chat forum and I will ask them for you to Ingela and Angelica.
Can I add something?
Yeah,
there,
of course.
Angelica?
Please
I
do.
think it's worth mentioning that it's actually forward-looking.
Oh,
it's not like sustainability reporting and auditing. As I don't know the historical way we did. This is forward-looking, which is the big difference so far.
Thank you, Ine. You are so right. I can talk a little bit about that, because when you are looking into only data that is accident-based or reporting, like I said a little bit, like reported for a year ago, you don't see it. You cannot assume that this, for example, what's happening with the economy now would have happened, just for 4 months ago. And people were, in my opinion, thinking about, oh, let's sacrifice, lives for the economy. Oh, please, no, it has to be real-time data, and we have to follow the development of the real world. Otherwise, everything else is a construct. So the forward-looking is actually gathering that in a predictable way. Yes, thank you for that. It's so much in my bones.
Yeah,
so
yes, exactly. Then you forget. I know it is.
And I was thinking, just to really state it out there. So what do you think are the benefits of your system, of Innorbis system tools, compared to other comparable, or if there is anything comparable?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
But there are some attempts.
Yeah.
I would say, we are the framework that takes all the stakeholders into account, the intention of the scientific measures, the techniques of the scientific measurements, and the implementation and into the economic and the financial. That's very important. Otherwise, you have a lot of disciplines, very good. They're trying to do a lot of things, but they don't get to the point and the integration into what we really measure.
So you have the holistic perspective in that sense.
Very holistic and very detailed as well. Yeah. So we go from the macro, the intention, into the details, and that comes with the data, of course. We are not at the product level data yet. That's, for us to work on. Yeah. It's the next step. So we are still on the business level, not on the product level. Yeah. So we have a lot to develop together.
Because that was my next question. What would you say? I mean, no system is perfect or will probably ever be perfect, but what would you say are the drawbacks of this system,
Okay.
just to nuance the
Okay, I have
picture a little bit.
one of the answers I already mentioned. It's still on the development, and there are loads to do. And take this. I mean, sustainability is not a standard yet. Some people, when I see ESG, they think environmental things, and it's not. I mean, a lot of it is governance and it's social aspect. And some people think circular economy is just recycling, and it's not. Come on, it's so you have that problem. But then in another point, I would say you have, of course, a little company still, a little player compared to the huge, large players in the financial world, for example. And that is quite of a struggle, of course, because we want to keep the neutrality, we want to keep the independency, so we cannot be owned by certain, players. So it's I wouldn't call it a weakness, but of course it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And we need to be different for not getting the business corrupted in corrupted models.
Yeah.
So the steering of the company is very important.
Yeah.
I think it's also, I can add up here, being a little bit external still, that I think that the business needs, and I mean the governments as well on national level, needs a go-to place.
Very good. Yes.
For the measurements and the metrics, because it's all, it's scattered all over the place, and we need a kind of new label.
Right.
That will be the next step, but I don't know if you want to develop that.
Yes, I can do
technical
that. You're right, because this is not about just another metric. I mean, like we said, you can do a lot of ratings. I think I hope I addressed that in my presentation. You can do a lot of ratings, and ratings are just a consequence of what you create from that data that you gather. But measurements and scientific measures in this framework is something completely different. It's something that will serve regulators and anybody with transparency of what's going on. And then they can take their decisions. It's not up to me. But the system is there to compare and to drive.
And it's subjective.
Yeah.
Very objective.
I would like to get back to your presentation, Ingela, about the circular economy. And what is your recommendation for companies that have the ambition to go circular or change into a circular business model? Where should they start?
Yeah. Call me. No, the thing is that it's a very big question, because as I saw in my presentation, you have to scope in what you want to do, and that of course depends on where you are in terms of maturity, in terms of size, of course, of the company, if you're a small startup or medium-sized SME, or if you're a big corp. Of course it depends on all that and what industry you're in, if you're into services or products, etc. So, but say that what I would like to start with is to, as you said a little bit, step up and take leadership. If we're now talking to sustainability managers, so step up and take leadership and educate yourself about circular economy, because it's not sustainability, it's not the same thing. And also get ambassadors around you. So educate in turn others and see to that they go to some kind of introductory course or something like that in the circular economy. One is the 6-week course, which I mentioned to you with the Exeter University, which is an online 6-week course, which I know that H&M, being amongst the CE100, and IKEA and other companies, Swedish companies, being part of Ellen MacArthur Foundation CE100, they send their employees to this course, and it's really good. But some kind of educational step up, I think you should also surround yourself with a sustainability manager, because then you have an easier life. If you got ambassadors around you, they also know what you're talking about. When I say ambassadors, it can be, of course, the CEO is very good to have as an ambassador for this, and but also the middle management. Well, middle management is very, very important, and at all levels, I would say, in a corporate, it would be all levels to understand what they can do and what mandate they have. You can see that one example is from Philips in the Netherlands. So they took the decision on executive level that they're going to go for this, the circular business models and products as a service, and they sell light instead of some kind of yeah. So anyway, at the end, after some time, nothing happened. Not much happened, and they said, why? We have taken this on strategic level. Why isn't much happening in the organization on different levels and different business units? But of course, this is an old story. When they with the executive level taken a decision and then nothing happens. Of course, it's about communicate, but also in this case to give mandate, maybe to build it into the appraisals, the performance appraisals, and small things like that. And of course, they need to understand. They need to get interested. What is this? And a lot of people are actually interested in it's building interest within the company. So many companies are looking into this.
Let me just add to that. I would say we have some brave CEOs out there. There are not many, but we work with a couple of working packages and integrating this framework within their processes. And I would say, yes, they also need, management and CEOs also need the mandate from the steering boards.
Yeah.
And that is so important, that the steering board has also the competence and the understanding of the risks and opportunities for the business to integrate this. That's so huge.
Yeah,
and not only driving incentives or sales figures, because it's not going to happen anymore. Business as usual is gone.
Yeah. But what you can do, to answer your question a little bit also, what that was about leadership and culture. What you also need to do, of course, what you can do on the ground is you can set up this circularity, for example. It's a simplistic tool. It's very simple to use, and just use it as a sort of starting point where you are, or you can go through your value chain, the supply chain, and start there. And also look upstream on the design of the product. What can we do? And then start small. Start small and a show project, a low-hanging fruit. Maybe you can choose to be smart. You can choose the easier low-hanging fruit project, so you can show good figures and performance and progress, and then you have easier to do the next one. So, but it's very, very important to have somebody there to look at the value creation and the value capture, because you need to have some economics. So have the CFO with you is also a very good idea, because it's about economics. The circular economy is about economy, no surprise. So it's not about recycling and waste management, which has unfortunately it has sort of, that has been the discussion and focus around that. But if we just concentrate on those items in our material flows, then we will miss the whole big idea with the circular economy from a system perspective, which is much more than just materials.
So. From what I hear now, what you both are saying, that knowledge is key here. And I was thinking many of our members and many of those of you watching are probably sustainability managers, and many of you working in companies with a long history and are used to do business as usual. And what would you say to those sustainability managers who have not yet get their top management on board, maybe in this transition? How should they go about and start, even though it's a small step? But
it's a very important step. They need to lift up from the sustainability metrics to include that into a CFO work. I'm an old CFO, so I can talk about that. To start align that within the economics, and from there show the advantage of working with that. Now, having said that, some people still think that waste is a cost. And I tell you, as I was working with ABB for many years ago on the aspects of it, I talk about costs. I mean, I know what it means, and this is something that it's not to be given somewhere else, like, oh, I don't want to look at that, because, you will have to be in charge and take care of that. If it's pollution, if it's waste, that is to be included. And not only on a cost, you could actually make a completely different assessment of that and work, for example, on don't see waste as just, throw something in nature, or you need to take this circular perspective and opportunity and
to think out of the box, because
yes.
it's very much about, I was working with lean and quality before,
Right.
you know, processes and so on, and resource efficiency and that matter. But what it's also stopped, it always stopped by the gate of the company. You sold the product and bye-bye, you never see it again. Now you have to think holistically and thinking, okay, can we take this product back? Take a simple example, and how would that, you know, how would the logistics look like? And you have to create an understanding and working teams in the company with different skills and work around the idea of the circular economy and the concept and the principles. And then you can show, actually, when I started my MBA at Bradford, we worked very much around calculations on business cases. And I remember the first time I did it, we did it on an espresso coffee machine with different, you know, all the different product as a service and reuse and remanufacture, etc. And we had the calculations in nitty-gritties on the linear way of producing an espresso machine and just waving goodbye, and then the different ways that you brought the product back, and you do all the marketing things as well, because it's also very important to, you know, in this case, to have a value proposition that is interesting to the customer. That is key. So it's not, it's money, it's show me the cash, but it's also a value proposition that is interesting for the customer. So there is also a way to start, you know, what would be interesting. So if you are a corporate and you have some resources, I would also go for some market research. You know, what is down the line? What would they be interested in? And it can be can be a hurdle sometimes to you know, because people don't know what is around the corner. They don't just know what you have right now. But that is what makes it so all these very exciting, because it's actually innovation and innovative creative thinking that it's all about.
Let me give a couple of very concrete examples. Yes, let's take the auto industry. You know, I've worked with that industry for many years. Everybody knows that sales doesn't have those margins. So why are you still tracking that? We know that the margins are on after sales. And why are you still tracking the number of cars sold? Because, you know, after you've produced a lot of cars, and you could take clothes, the same thing, you produce a lot of things, and then suddenly you have that huge production that you need to push out in consumers. And then you see, and then you have losses, you have capital that is kept within these balance sheets. That's not a good way of, you know, operating anymore. You need to think about functionality. How long does this car can go from A to B? How renewable, you know, the energy that is used, and then you can go into IT sector and think about, okay, well, we all need this computer. What are we doing that? And why are we still measuring, I mean, counting, it's not measuring, it's actually count how many PCs have been sold. Come on, that's not the point anymore.
But I think also the consumers, and also actually the EU Commission, they're looking now for regulations and so on built-in obsolescence, for example. You have a reaction there. Then I think there will come some regulation about that. Also, the extended producer responsibility and things like that. So things are moving in the right direction. But the most important thing is to say that actually, that sustainability so far, when I work with sustainability manager and so on, it was always a cost to the company. With the circular business models, you actually have an opportunity to have increased revenue in some way or another.
And this is exactly what we're going to talk about on our Sustainability Day in October as well, to the profitability of sustainability. But do you think that the current pandemic that is now ongoing, do you think that now really can make this transition into sustainability and circular economy?
Let me start from that one. What the pandemic has done is that it has shown there are a lot of the ratios we follow, we have a follow-up on. I mentioned, for example, PE ratio and all of that. It's not relevant anymore. So to give the word of Professor William Fisher that I work with, we are what we measure. If you continue to measure, you know, the GDP and this kind of, you know, ratios that are going, you know, upside down at the moment, you are not seeing the full picture. You really need to measure and start gathering the categorization of what does matter for the real world, what's going on, so you can picture, this is what I have to do. These are the priorities of my business, not only a cost or a report. That's
it's
huge.
very interesting to see how this, goes, because now everybody's talking about, okay, we have to kickstart a new economy and so on. We'll see.
Yeah.
We'll see.
We'll see.
That's about to see. But what it showed, I must say, it's the brittleness of the global supply chains. So I think that the reaction might be that you will see some production coming back to Europe if you take the European perspective. That depends, of course, of the prices of what it costs to produce in China, etc. But maybe there is some thought that maybe we should take some parts to secure production. And another thing which is even more severe and more clear is the insufficiency of food, for example, that we have to rely on our own to be self-sufficient in food production. And it was painful to see that Finland, I think they are like 110% self-sufficient on food production, and we had like 20% in Sweden.
Wow.
It's really in an unprecedented times, but it's a good thing with the pandemic in that way, that it showed us, what we have to do within the system, because from a circular point of view, resilience is one of the goals, to have this resilience in many terms in the society, and the pandemic showed that we don't have any resilience really when it
because actually we have the sustainability panel that we ask around 70 sustainability managers. Maybe many of you out there are part of this panel. Just recently, how the pandemic has affected their businesses, and many replied that it actually has clarified the weaknesses along the value chain, and also the need for maybe a changed business model somehow. Do you think this is relevant for many companies and maybe gets top management to actually dare? Because I think that there's a need of brave leadership here, because if you are used to have this old mindset, we've been doing this business for many years, it's very scary to change track all of a sudden.
But those who don't, it will cost a lot of money to be the last one to have to do it.
Let's be a little bit more concrete and give some examples. So when we talk about the supply chains, for example, in the 90s, a lot of global companies have gone to places where they could get a cheaper rate on the production of the workers on those places. I mean, what does that say today when we want everybody to have a fair development, in this regardless if they are in Europe or in Asia or in an underdeveloped country? So we need to care about everybody. So, and with the aspect of the risks increasing and perhaps getting the production back to mitigate those risks. So think again, maybe that idea of getting a cheaper, that's wrong, right? That's perhaps the wrong thing, that your intention to get a cheaper product. I mean, you should look into all the costs, all the risks in a circular way, for example, and then you can start seeing, okay, so what are the gains and the opportunities here, and not just push the supply chain so they go bankrupt or the people don't have decent conditions of work that is not sustainable, to be very diplomatic.
Just to cut them off.
I think we will see a lot more and closer collaborations,
right?
And also that maybe the shorten the relationship, and how you work closer in the supply chain to work around things and to secure things. I think we'll see a lot more of collaboration actually. And
we have just a few minutes left, so I would just like, as a last question to you both, do you have any, in like 10 seconds each, what would be your what do you think our sustainability managers and companies out there should do first and foremost, just to ensure their future-proofing their sustainability within their organizations onwards? It's a very tough question, I know.
10 seconds.
Yeah, just very briefly, what would you say is the company's role here?
The company role or the sustainability manager role in the company?
let's go for the sustainability manager role.
Yeah, well,
Right.
well, but what we said before, a little bit step up and take help, make ambassadors, and increase your own knowledge, and then take the other ones with you, and go for it.
Very good.
10-second answer.
Yeah, very good.
From
Very
me, I
good.
would say both to the sustainability managers and the ESG specialists out there, I would say get involved into the integration and not excluding supplies or without having a very good decision-making tool framework in your hands. I would say you need to integrate that in core business. It's not to be a silo. So you have all my support.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for this excellent presentations and lovely talk we had here. I hope all of you back home or wherever you are, I get very inspired, and share this webinar with your colleagues, and see you in our next webinar or seminar. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.